What just happened? That was absolutely bonkers. That was nuts. Jake Paul just defeated Tyron Woodley in a boxing match. They went 8 rounds, they went the distance, and it went to a split decision, with the judges finding Jake Paul the winner, with one judge saying that he thinks Tyron Woodley won it. And a lot of people right now are clamoring to the internet to say that Tyron Woodley did win that fight. He should have won that fight. Well, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but didn't. Now, how these things are judged, nobody knows. I don't really know what goes on. I don't exactly know the criteria that each judge was looking at, because obviously they were looking at 3 different sets of criteria because they got 3 different scores. You could argue that Tyron Woodley won a couple rounds. He definitely won the 4th round by a lot. He would have knocked Jake Paul down. That would have been a knockdown. Had the ropes not held Jake Paul up, he landed a flush right hand. And after that was doing a lot better. This fight went exactly how I thought it would, with a few exceptions. I kind of thought that Tyron Woodley would fade in the end of the fight and that Jake Paul would be stronger in the end, and actually the reverse was true. And I said that because of Tyron Woodley's, tendency to maybe get a little tired, but he obviously dealt with the pressure better than Jake Paul did. You could tell in the end of the fight that Jake Paul was definitely feeling the pressure of that moment. He was exhausted. He'd taken harder shots than he'd ever taken before. He was in there with a real tough dude that was trying to knock his head off. And it was obvious on his face and his body language. Jake Paul's body language at the end of the fight was that of a beaten man, but it was already too late. He'd already put too many rounds in the books that he won. Now, as I said, the fight was going to be close. I think every round was very close. Every round was very close. And the only people that would say different are people, and you'll see them in this comment section down below if you want to go comment down there and tell me who you think won that fight. People are very emotional about this. People hate Jake Paul. They want him to lose. They want it to not be true. They want Tyron Woodley to win that fight and have won it decisively because he's a real fighter and Jake Paul's not, which I don't think anyone can say anymore, but that's just not what happened. Just because you want something to be true doesn't make it true. Just maybe you could argue something should be true. That doesn't make it true. Jake Paul won that fight. He won more rounds. Now, the judging was a little weird, and judging has always been weird, but it seems like judging in boxing and MMA has gotten weirder lately. Like, I don't know what the judges are looking at. When Anderson Silva, with his fight, they called that a split decision, and I just feel like, do they maybe just do this to make it not seem, like, do they do it as a consolation prize to make the guy feel better, to make it more interesting? It was so obvious who won more rounds. Now, every round was close. Every round was very, very hotly contested. But the beginning of that match, I do want to talk about the body language in the beginning, because Tyron Woodley sometimes does notoriously have trouble pulling the trigger and, taking initiative. He came out and he used some body language that I've actually seen before, I've seen recently. He came out with a sort of awkward, stuttery step and an unwillingness to throw the right. And it looked real suspicious there for a little while. I know what a lot of you were thinking in the first 2 rounds. It's like, dude, did they pay him extra not to throw the thing? But the little shuffling, weird little hopping footwork and the awkward head movement, I've seen that before, and it's in new guys who have done a lot of classes and are very skilled but are sparring for the first time and want to be so close before they uncork. And you'd say, well, Tyron Woodley's a veteran. There's no way that he was feeling the pressure of that moment. But he's a veteran of MMA. He's on a losing streak. He's older. He got beat up the last time he was fighting. You could argue that he felt some pressure. And what's interesting to me with the body language is when it started, Jake Paul seemed so much larger than Tyron Woodley. Even bigger than he was in the press conferences and the face-offs, which then he seemed even bigger than he did in the beginning. He just seemed to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But by the end of the fight, he didn't look that much bigger. His posture was wilting. His body language was wilting. But once Tyron Woodley landed a good shot and kind of worked the kinks out, he started walking Jake down, which might have been one of the reasons that they scored it the way they did. It's possible when you can't see what punches are landing, like if one of the judges couldn't see or decided they didn't know for sure how many punches were landing, that you would go with ring control. Like the guy pushing the guy around, the guy on the outside. If all things being equal, the guy walking forward and cutting off is winning, and the guy circling and running away is losing, if all things are equal. So you could argue that he definitely controlled the ring more, but he just didn't land as many punches. In the beginning, we saw very fast hands from Jake Paul. Very fast counter left hooks. Every time Tyron Woodley would try something, Jake Paul would land that counter left hook. It was very impressive. I think it's going to be weird if you're still on the he's not a real fighter until he fights a real boxer. He's a YouTuber. If you're still on that, it's looking super weird now. The dude did take some licks from a heavy hitter. I was surprised that he couldn't damage him more. He landed some flush left hooks, some flush counter left hooks. And I don't think you can get away with saying he's not a real fighter. Now, you could say he hasn't fought a boxer, sure. You could say Tyron Woodley, you might jump off the Tyron Woodley bandwagon and be like, oh, that didn't count. It's like all the people that knew Ben Askren was going to beat him, and then when Ben Askren lost, be like, but he was a wrestler. It's like all the people that know Tyron Woodley's going to beat him, and it's like, oh, but he's older MMA fighter on his way out. Please. It was a boxing match under boxing rules with boxing judges, and that's part of it. But I'm not here to gloat, though I did tell you so, which my heart was pounding, man. Ever since I started getting bigger on YouTube, it's gotten scarier to make predictions because like I think I'm working at like 80 to 85% prediction rate, but like if you get a couple wrong, people just lose their minds. They go insane. They just, like, I have to delete my channel. It means I don't know anything about fighting. And I'm like, yeah, Israel Adesanya picked Jake Paul to win this thing. If he'd have lost, would you have told him? I don't know. But I'm not here to gloat, not here to rub it in your face. But I did tell you so, and you are stupid and don't know anything about fighting. Just kidding. You had an opinion. It didn't come out to be true. That's not the way it works. Just because you picked wrong this time doesn't mean you'll pick wrong next time. Doesn't mean you didn't have good reasons for picking right. But I would love for you to examine those reasons that you think Tyron Woodley should have won. Or if you still think Tyron Woodley did win, which he didn't. He didn't win. Count the punches is very simple. It's arithmetic. I don't know. Maybe if you say that should have been a knockdown, but they were fighting in a ring. That was one of the rules. Like, he didn't win. You want him to win because you don't like Jake Paul. As a person, it's got nothing to do with the boxing. It's got nothing to do with the punches. You want him to win because Jake Paul's some sort of threat to whatever it is you believe should be true. Because you know what Jake Paul's message at the end was? Hey, I used to be a bully, and I don't like bullies. And you shouldn't bully people, and if you are bullied, you should find something that gives you confidence, like boxing. That was his message. Tyron Woodley's like, I think I won the fight. Let's run it back. That was his message. So I know you want Jake Paul to be the bad guy here, but there's just nothing to support that other than your feelings.